365 Awakening to Love. I'm your host, Tomás Garza, and it is Sunday here today in North America, and I hope everyone's having a great weekend. Wherever you are, I thank you for tuning in and thank you for catching the replay. I know a lot of you have caught this live stream in the few months that we've been running it on the replay and live. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you all so much for joining me today. So I've got a couple of things that I want to talk about here before we get into today's idea in the workbook for students, which, by the way, is lesson 70. It's a big one with a lot in it. So we may spend more than one day on this material. It's very rich and it's very foundational. In fact, every idea in the workbook is foundational. Some jump out at you more than others, don't they? You may have found that as you're going along, is that some ideas deserve a closer look, right? Some deserve maybe a second or a third day of practice. Some you might not relate to at all. Others just really hit home in a way that's, well, transformational. Massive and fundamentally transformational. This is quite common, and I will share that for me, lesson 70 is one of those ideas. So it talks about salvation and guilt. And just a couple of quick words on that. Many of you may have been raised with a vastly different notion of what salvation is and where it comes from, and that may have confused you to no end. It certainly did me. But before we launch into the idea itself, I'll just share that I grew up in a couple of different Christian traditions. One was the Methodist Church, which I was in. My parents were involved in that when I was younger. And then my mother got us involved in a Southern Baptist church around about the time I was 10 or 11. And well, the next 4 to 5 years were chock full of, well, religious fundamentalism. Yeah. So you may be familiar with that, whether you were raised in a tradition like this or not. It's very easy to see in today's world people that are religiously fundamentalist. And now what I mean by that is pretty much thinking their way is the only way. My building's better than your building because I go to this particular building that we built on this street corner at 11 a.m. on Sunday. And if we're really, really good people, we'll go on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. And well, my building's just better. Why? Because we said. The simplistic? Yeah, maybe. Accurate? Definitely. Yes. That's the way that I was, well, raised. And it never hit home with me. So salvation was seen as being outside of myself, right? Totally outside of me. And it was also seen as something that happens to us when we die. In other words, when we leave this physical body behind, what we call death, then and only then are you saved, right? No, that never resonated with me. I always I just knew, intuitively got that it was something, salvation, that's accessible to us right now. And it is right now. We do not have to wait. Now, we could choose to wait. How? By identifying with the ego and running around holding grudges and grievances and lashing out at people and attacking and doing anything but showing up as love. That's how it's done in the world. We've all done it. We all do it, and you might be doing it right now. So if you are, okay, that's fine, right? It is no fault of our own that we've been conditioned and raised this way. I was raised in a very fundamentalist tradition. When I got my driver's license at 15, back in the 1980s in the US state of New Mexico, they let kids get their full-on driver's licenses at 15. So once I did that, it was bye-bye to the fundamentalist church. I never went back. Still haven't been back. And well, I would tell my mom, who used to send me to church and to Sunday school. She used to send me and wouldn't. She stopped going herself. I mean, she was involved for a few years, and then, let's just say hypocritically, because she passed away 5 years ago, so I can say this, stopped going and wanted to send me. I would drive off telling her I was going to Sunday school and this church service, and I went for a hike instead every time. Yeah, every time until she stopped insisting, which was about a year later. So yeah, I was one of those kids in Sunday school that asked questions like, okay, if God is perfect love, then why this punishment focus? Why this thunderbolts and lightning and death and hate, 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 hate? Why? Love is not capable of hate. They're mutually exclusive. You can't have one and the other. Fear is not the same as love. If you are acting in a loving way, you're not fearful, and vice versa. If you're fearful, you can't be loving, can't be wholly loving. That's the choice that we make moment to moment. And today's lesson will talk about that in some detail. So I just wanted to share those tidbits. Some of you may have heard it before because I've talked about this on the live stream a little bit. But if you're new and just joining me, well, that's my background. Maybe you can relate to that. Maybe you can't. I was one of those kids in Sunday school that always asked the tough questions. And by the way, I never once got a satisfactory answer from any of the adults. I got a lot of blank stares, and some people were skillful at trying to change the conversation, to change the subject, and some weren't, just like life. So, now that I'm 49 years old, I can sit here and laugh about it. It's pretty interesting, the limitations that we put on ourselves as human beings, isn't it? So let's go into it. Lesson 70. Here in the workbook. Today's idea is my salvation comes from me, okay? My salvation comes from me, not out there. This is fundamental. It's very important, and I'll explain why it's very important. We want to see things in the world as outside of us, don't we? If you never think about this in your daily life, getting swept away with work and the kids and gardening and the cat and dog and bills and your Twitter feed and Instagram and everything that we involve ourselves in, makes perfect sense. Let this be an opportunity where you sit and take a step back from the daily grind and think about the foundational principles of everything that you now believe and question them. Isn't that exciting? I say it is. The ego, of course, says it's not, and will try to stop you. How? Well, seeing things as outside of you, like salvation. Also, interestingly enough, and today's idea talks about this, we see salvation as outside of us. We also see guilt outside of us. This is psychological projection, where if we feel guilty, we hate feeling guilty, so we put this out onto people. We blame other people. If we're afraid, we lash out at somebody. We want someone else to have that fear, which really is our own. That's how it works. We try to place guilt outside of us. We try to place salvation outside of us. So spiritual practice, in whatever form this takes for you, is the accepting, and I do mean accepting responsibility for the fact that actually none of this is outside you. Guilt is not outside you. It's in you. It's in me. It's in my mind. If I feel like lashing out at somebody, that's not on them. Even if they've done something that's egregious, I'm in charge of my own reaction to that, aren't I? So if I feel attack thoughts and want to act out on them, that's in my mind. It's me. I own that. I have to own that. What happens in the world, we lash out anyway and say it's the other person's fault. They've sinned against us. They've made us angry. They've transgressed us. They're deserving and worthy of whatever punishment in our fit of rage we're willing to deal out in the moment. Yeah. Not much of a fun way to live, is it? It's not very much fun to be in a fit of rage. If you've ever had a period of time in your life where you were very angry, let's say you went through a divorce or a separation, or you were fired from your job, had some kind of high level conflict, it's not one of the best times in your life, is it? And lots of thoughts of separation, lots of victimhood, lots of lashing out, lots of blaming. We tend to see everything as outside of us. Really, when we accept that guilt and fear thoughts are inside ourselves, it's liberating because salvation is also inside of us. Now, by salvation, I mean our own awakening, our awakening to the truth of who we really are. It's not outside of us in we're waiting to be saved by Jesus when we die, which is what I was taught. It's available right now in the present moment, which is all that we have. Think about this. The reason this gets repeated in every spiritual tradition, pretty much in the world, is because it's true. The future doesn't exist. Past is gone. We have an opportunity right now to choose love. We have an opportunity right now to remove the veils, the obstacles, the clouds that are obscuring our experience of ourself, capital S here. That's what we have the opportunity to do. We don't have that opportunity 20 years from now. The future's not here. And if you didn't take that opportunity 20 years ago, no problem. Take it right now. We spend time aggravating ourselves over the future and whipping ourselves into a psychological frenzy and stress and a state over things that haven't come to pass yet. And we also look backward into the past and beat ourselves up for things that we could have, would have, should have done. It could be as benign as going to the store at a bad time yesterday, or it could have been something a lot more egregious that you're actually acutely ashamed of that you did in the past. So we spend a lot of time in the past or the future, and very little in the only time that actually exists right now. This is where we make these decisions. That's why people talk about mindfulness. That's why people talk about the present moment. It's all we have. Literally all we have. So if guilt is in our own mind, so too is our own salvation. Nothing outside of yourself can save you. You know what this also means is that nothing outside yourself can hurt you. Now, this takes a little bit of time to get accustomed to. The ego resists this, right? Because it wants to see other people, other political parties, other people across the world as enemies, as separate from you, out to get you. It wants to maintain this sense of separation. If nothing outside yourself can save you, nothing outside yourself can hurt you. Yeah, your salvation is within you. Think of what we've done in this lifetime. Think about your own life, and it's easy to come up with examples for all of us of outside people, outside situations, outside objects that we looked to for our own salvation, when really we need to be looking at ourselves. And honestly, we get to look at ourselves. We're in control. So when this hits home, It's liberating. It will speed you along your path of awakening when you deeply accept and allow this idea, my salvation comes from me. When you allow it to permeate every fiber of your being and just get out of your own way and allow this, things really, really begin to happen for you. They really do. If you've experienced this, you know what I mean. If you haven't experienced it yet, well, one day you will. Will that day be today? I mean, will this be the moment that you choose love? Will this be the moment that you accept that your salvation comes from you, that you own it, that you take responsibility for it, realizing nothing outside yourself can save you? A brand new Mercedes, guess what? Can't save you. All right. If you're just looking for a brand new pickup, well, that can't save you either. A newer, better, shinier relationship can't save you. A religious icon cannot save you. Yeah, a contemporary religious icon cannot save you. All right. More money can't save you. And by save, I mean awaken you. Allow you to experience the truth of who we really are as one with God, okay? That's self with a capital S. It's love. A Course in Miracles is all about removing the obstacles to the experience of love, to the awareness of love, the presence of it, which has never gone anywhere, despite all our meanderings, despite our wanting to see salvation in a bigger bankroll and a shinier, hotter, new, sexy partner, right? In a newer car, yeah, you know, bigger house, bigger status, blah, 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 whatever. It's not outside of us. Nothing against all of those things, of course, but that's not where we look for real spiritual awakening, for our own salvation. What does this mean? It means you're in charge of the universe. If nothing outside you can hurt you, this does mean, if you're doing the math here, that you travel with the power of God 24/7, always, and you've never not traveled with the power of God. Why? God's will and your will are the same. You both will you to be happy, yes? Otherwise, there are plenty of other programs in the world that you could be watching. You could be watching anything else on YouTube that does not deal with spirituality, that does not deal with taking responsibility for yourself, for your own growth. It's what it means to be an adult spiritually, is owning the fact that the solutions are within us. If guilt is actually within us, we can choose guilt's opposite. We can choose love. And we can choose it again right now. So I want to call your attention here, if you're looking at lesson 70 in the workbook, to the practice periods. Now, yesterday on the live stream, I talked about a guided meditation that the workbook recommends be done in about a 10 to 15 minute period. So we didn't do it on this live stream, of course, because it's very short. But it talks about a light, which is us, ourself, one with God, love, that's always been there, but hidden behind a veil of clouds or a bank of clouds. Think of it as a giant fog bank. And in the meditation, we walk through, we formulate the will, right? The determination to walk through the clouds, and we begin to do it. And we discover that, in fact, they're clouds. It's not a solid wall. Whatever shapes or whatever colors or sizes we picture the clouds to be, we discover we can pass right through them. And at first it might be scary, right? At first it might be cold and wet, but they begin to dissipate and there is a light on the other side that is who we really are. So This workbook lesson here, lesson 70, has us practice in pretty much the same way here. And you can read the commentary on how the workbook suggests that you do the lessons and apply the day's idea. And as you know, I don't spend too much time on the live stream on that because we're all adult learners, and either we will be motivated to do this or we won't. Right? So really, I mean, it's one or the other. Even if all you do for the day is recite the day's idea that my salvation comes from me, that's very important. It can't come from anywhere else. So repeat that. This is actually part of the practice period for today, along with a 10 to 15-minute meditation. My salvation comes from me. It cannot come from anywhere else. Again, it can't come from a Mercedes-Benz. It can't come from a newer, younger, hotter, sexier partner. It just can't. That's not where you find salvation. You don't find it in a new pair of jeans. Sorry. It's not the way it works. My salvation cannot come from any of these things. It comes from me and only me. This is worth repeating. My salvation cannot come from any of these things after you've listed, Mercedes, new cars, new bank accounts, right? New partners, a younger looking, fitter, hotter physical bod, right? Can't come from any of those things. Yes, these things can be wonderful in the world, and nothing against them. However, that's not where your salvation comes from. It comes from you. So it's worth repeating. My salvation comes from me. It cannot come from anywhere else. My salvation does not come from any of the things in the world. My salvation comes from me and only me. All right. Pretty powerful. I can say from my own experience that accepting this, taking this lesson to heart, relieved me of a lot of strain, of a lot of burdens that I had placed on myself. Why? Through no fault of my own, honestly. We're all conditioned. We were raised by our parents, who were raised by their parents, who were raised by their parents in societies that have societal rules and conditioning. So by the time we're very small, we have this blueprint foisted upon us, instilled in us for how the world's supposed to work and what our function in it is. Now, what we're doing is we're unlearning in spiritual practice, aren't we? We're learning a different way that's more resonant, that's in accord with truth. So here we are. All right. So if you have questions about this, I hope that you've typed them here in the live stream. In the comments is what I mean to say. So let's see who's tuning in here. I'd like to say hello to you. Cindy and Robert, hello. How are you? Yes. Happy Sunday and good day to you. And Robert, I guess it's good afternoon. Yeah. And Cindy, you love that light. Yes. Me too. Yeah. Me too. Because the clouds aren't real. We make them up, don't we? I mean, the clouds can symbolize anything. They can symbolize a self-concept that you have of, I can't do this, I can't do that. Or it can be a grudge or a grievance that you continue to harbor against somebody, saying, I hate so-and-so, or I despise X political party. I mean, think about it. I use politics as an example because what better example could there be in the modern world of people picking sides and fighting like dogs? Really, literally, like dogs. Why? Is someone that believes differently than you really different from you? No matter what the outward appearance would be, the answer is no when you think about it. I mean, don't take it from me or anyone else talking on a global network. It's really important that you experience this for yourself. Spirituality is all about your own personal experience. It is not about blindly accepting or following something that someone else says. Examine it, do it. If you're skeptical, I love it. Fantastic. I encourage questions. You should be asking questions, but while you're at it, question everything that you now believe. Don't hold anything back. That's the same as holding a grudge against somebody, forgiving everyone else but one person. Guess what? If you haven't forgiven everybody, then forgiveness is incomplete. So if you harbor one grudge, that means your forgiveness is incomplete. So question everything. If you don't question everything that you now believe, then, well, eventually you'll end up questioning everything you now believe after considerable delay. I mean, that's the nicest way to put it. This delay could be decades of this lifetime, could be the rest of this lifetime into following lifetimes. And if you don't believe that that's possible, that's all right. Just take today's lesson to heart that my salvation comes from me, and just tell yourself that, because that is true. So when that's accepted, then rapid progress can be made. How will you measure the progress? Well, how do you feel? Are you happier? Are you more joyful? Are you more lighthearted? Do you feel like you're carried up and lifted forward by a power that is greater than the ego? The ego doesn't exist. Do you feel lighter? Do you feel more loving? Do you feel more forgiving, compassionate, joyful? Yeah. If you do, that is a sure bet that what you're doing is working. Keep doing it. Keep doing it so that we can remove all of the barriers to the awareness and the presence of love. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in here. And if you're catching this on the replay, feel welcome to leave questions and comments about either today's lesson or anything in A Course in Miracles, spirituality in general, because as you're discovering, all of these lessons are universal in theme, and they do apply no matter what your spiritual or religious background may be. All right. So thank you all for joining me here today. Have a great rest of your day and a happy weekend. And we will see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for